As far as I'm concerned, as long as that same respect and recognition is not shown toward every one of our people in this country, it doesn't exist for me. And during the few moments that we have left, we want to have just an off-the-cuff chat between you and me. Us. We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
As the UK continues to be in lockdown mode due to the Panasonic pandemic, many people have turned to Clubhouse. For those who don't know, Clubhouse is an app in which you can have a variety of discussions with people all over the world. I do remember lockdown 1 when everyone jumped on House Party, and that died quite quickly. And now it seems that Clubhouse has taken over. One such interesting person I met, and there are many interesting people I've met on the app, but one that has stood out is my guest today, Janine Francois. Well, go on, Janine.
Hi. Well done for getting the surname right. Impressive.
I try. Thanks for coming on. To all my listeners out there, honestly, I've engaged with Janine on some dope topics, and she always comes with the sauce. If it's not the sauce, it's tearing singlets. If not tearing singlets. So honestly, it's been a really insightful kind of engagement and fruitful, and I've learned a lot. So on the back of a conversation we had, particularly when it was surrounding around BLM and the money where the BLM went to, we had like a break-off room about, loving, and this, I will title this episode, How to Love Black People Politically. And I feel a lot of the time, our politics in the UK may be skewed to a black-centric, black-only politic. And I get that, as, people are hurting, and it seems to, that politics seems to encapsulate the feelings and emotions of people. However, I think as you begin to read more, as you begin to kind of widen your horizon, you see that first and foremost, that's like a unattainable politic anyway. And it's not really in line with the black radical tradition that teaches us to, lift every voice in the language of Cornell West. So, first things first, a question to you. Where do you think we should situate our politics in terms of tackling anti-blackness and racism?
Yeah, that's really a really good first question to ask, actually. So I'm really drawing into the thought that in order to challenge anti-blackness, we ultimately need to challenge white supremacy and imperialism, because effectively anti-blackness isn't a thing in of its own right. It's an outcome, or it's a symptom of white supremacy, imperialism, and it's historical as well. So I feel like you couldn't just challenge anti-blackness on its own, because it wouldn't take away the wider system, and in fact it could reproduce or form into some other form of subjugation onto black people. So I'm a big thought of in order to challenge anti-blackness, we need to challenge the root. Let's go to the actual source of what's causing this particular kind of violence onto black people, onto black bodies. Because once we do that, once we get to the root, we then inherently eradicate anti-blackness and its other kind of manifestations like colorism and stuff like that.
Okay, so where do you feel anti-blackness gets its power from?
White supremacy. I feel like, even the idea of what does it mean to be anti-black? I feel like we need a really clear definition of what anti-blackness is, because sometimes I see this a weaponizing of something that just isn't anti-black. It's just, that person's just disagreeing with you. And it isn't because they're disagreeing with you specifically because you're a black person. They might be disagreeing with you because maybe what you're saying is whack, or what you're saying is ungrounded or unfounded in any kind of historicism or conceptualization or even politic, right? And sometimes I see black folk, use anti-blackness in a way that isn't helpful or that isn't anti-black. And I think there's also space to hold contradictory thoughts, that someone can contradict to your politic but not necessarily contradict to your existence. And I think sometimes we find that hard to hold, because obviously our politics are part of our lives and part of our existence, but sometimes we can also espouse things that are just not grounded in anything apart from our own maybe individual or small group reality. But doesn't make it the phenomena for all black people, the phenomena of something that is rooted in oppression, right? So an example could be I am a Black woman,
Mhm.
and I can't even think of an example at the top of my head, but it just could be like an example of like, maybe that affects Black women from my
Mhm.
particular social class, but it may not affect all Black women because I exist in a particular space, right? So an example could be,
Mm.
I don't know, yeah, I'm a Black woman and wearing, although this doesn't affect me because I work in the creative sector, so that doesn't matter. But if I worked in a more corporate sector where I'm expected to have more straightened hair, people could see me as unprofessional. Now that is
Yes.
true, and obviously that's a racist perspective, but that affects a particular kind of Black woman, right, who is socially mobile and upwardly, who perhaps is more educated, who exists in some kind of proximity to middle classness. Some other Black women from a different background might experience that, but it's a very rooted experience. So I guess it's really important that we kind of think about when we use like anti-Blackness and misogynoir for us to really like root it in a particular context. I think that's really helpful. And also not to weaponize it when someone disagrees with us. Because someone could disagree with that Black woman because she's espousing neoliberal ideologies. Would it make it anti-Black?
Mhm. Mm. So where do you like? Okay, let's talk about that specific kind of context, that geographical location.
Mm.
If we're gonna deal with what's your assessment of dealing with anti-blackness in the UK context then?
Tell me more, as in like,
Like, how do we start to deal with anti-blackness in the
mm,
UK context? What kind of politic is that? Is that a BAME politic? Is it a Fox
okay.
solidarity politic? What is it?
Yeah, that's interesting because, like, since talking to you a lot, I think about like being a Black Muslim and how you experience a particular kind of anti-Blackness that I just don't know because I'm not Muslim and
Yeah,
I don't exist in that space. Not that I can hold empathy for what you experience, but
yeah.
it's not what governs my reality, right? And so I guess like when we think about anti-Blackness, I guess I want us to be nuanced and complex to understand why it exists or how it's manifested. And again, like if anti-Blackness is really just white supremacy, it's just a specific form of violence that plays out onto Black bodies historically and historically informed for contemporary reality. And I guess what I'm also thinking is how do we understand that there might be particular types of anti-Blackness, even like Black people onto other Black people, right? So
Yeah.
even like Black people being Islamophobic to another Black person is a form of anti-Blackness because you're also
Mm.
not only wielding oppression, but you're kind of saying that there is a particular trope or type of what it means to form a
Oh, a
Blackness on
special
a
type
body.
of black that's
Yeah,
acceptable.
yeah. And if someone is
Wow.
Muslim, they kind of exist outside that paradigm, and in a way, their Blackness gets kind of revoked from them.
Wow.
So I think there's also like inter and intra dynamics at play when we think about anti-Blackness, but
So
also,
then surely, sorry to interject then,
mm,
surely then the answer cannot be getting so granular then. Because ultimately,
mm,
what that kind of does then, and I find a lot of the time the sentiment around dealing with anti-blackness, surely the question or the more pertinent question is, how does racism get its power? And
mm,
how can we kind of organize around and develop a politic that challenges the systems that oppress us?
mm,
Surely that is a more positive way. Otherwise, I can just see it descending into me as a West African
yeah,
Black
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Muslim can only deal with problems affecting West African Black
Mm.
Muslims.
I think this space, like, I'm a big space of like two things can mean contradiction and true at the same time. So I think
Hmm.
there's space to acknowledge that people have a particular lived experience and a particular reality that governs how they understand and move through the world.
Yeah.
And I think that's important because, that's people's kind of like tangible realities that the effect on their personhood, right? And then I
Hmm.
think there's also a possibility to hold what you're saying, which is how do we do, interracial or cross-racial solidarity? Or how
Yeah.
do we mobilize around the bigger question of like white supremacy and imperialism? Because anti-Blackness is in a subsection of these things. I feel like there's a possibility to hold both of those like strands because both of those strands inform each other. What I
Hmm.
think we are seeing, however, is the focus on the former, so the focus on getting very granular with how we see Black folks responding to racism effectively and how
Hmm.
anti-Black racism manifests in their lives. And I think that's where we're stopping. So we're just completely stopping on the idea of the lived experience, or we're stopping on the idea of like our social reality. We're not saying, okay, this is my lived experience, this is my social reality, these are the wider forces that affect it and why I experience particular kinds of like antagonisms and aggressions that is rooted in an anti-Black experience. And that's where we pause. We don't map it out. We don't think about actually these are systems of domination, these are
Mm.
systems part of a wider power structure, and that ultimately we wouldn't experience those kind of granular level forms of anti-blackness if we dismantle or challenge the wider system of white supremacy. So it's kind of like it's like being able to move in and out, so being able to map in and map out and do that process concurrently. And I think we're kind of stilting ourselves as thinking on a very granular level.
Absolutely. I mean, I totally agree with that. So when we're talking into a community, then are we, when we're arranging and organizing and developing a politic, are we not then specifically talking about us? When we let's say me and you, for example, are we not also doing the same thing? We're saying that we choose to be in community with a certain type of black person. You know, I mean, we give the famous example, and to quote you, that I'm not in community with black Tories.
Yeah, standard.
Okay, I was short and sweet.
I'm not in what, like, if you want me to.
Is that a form of anti-black? Yes, I do, but is that a form of anti-blackness in your eyes? Okay,
this is my
I
point.
agree with you, but unpack it for me. Unpack it for me.
For sure. The reason why I believe me saying that I did not want to be in community with a black Tory or with a homophobe or transphobe or misogynist, you know, whatever, because whilst that person might be black, you know, by phenotypically or what they look like or how we socialize them to be read as black, they're still espousing harmful and oppressive rhetoric that actually seeks to harm, especially black Tory or any, you know, homophobe, transphobe, but like especially black Tories around class and material reality, and that most black people are actually working class. So if you were a black Tory, whether that is capital C or small c conservative, you're actually upholding and reproducing neoliberalism, where black people outside of the UK, you know, are disproportionately murdered because of capitalism.
Yes.
So why would I want to be in community with someone who feels it's acceptable to espouse an ideology that kills other black people?
100% in agreement with you, but then not even a but let's say someone like, I don't know, a black Tory or black conservative, do they fall under the banner? And I think you might have a contention with the phrase "protect black women" or "melanin magic." Like, you know, don't get me wrong. I think
you're saying we need to protect Kemi. Is that what you're saying? You're saying Kemi got that black girl magic.
Have you not seen that? Let me not talk because I'm a man. Let me not talk. If I talk, they'll say, "Why are you talking?" So let me not talk. But what I would say when it comes to like these, I think I try to see the bigger picture here. It's no doubt that black Tories are in the positions in which they hold because they've purely serve the function of gaslighting the majority of people of color on their lived experiences. And that's why, you know, and I think you're aware of my position. I believe that representational politics and identity politics is killing our people because this kind of, you know, notion that, because this person is, you know, merely has a lot of melanin in their skin that they deserve our support, then I think, you know, that's how we end up with Obama. That's how we end up with, you know, support for Kamala Harris. That's how we end up with all these. That's how we end up with all these, you know, black and brown faces in high places. And I think a pertinent kind of quote I read the other day by Dr. Cornel West, who people who know me know I'm a stan. He said, you know, the measure of black success or black progress is not tied to how well the black middle class are doing.
For sure.
And I think that's a very important point. But let's kind of think through together arranging a politic in the UK context that deals with anti-blackness, challenges white supremacy, and possibly can get wide support. I want to title this episode "How to Love Black People Politically." What does that look like to you? How do we come to love black people politically? How do we show our people that this style of doing politics embraces and understands and acknowledges what they're going through, but directs that anger directs that energy into a politic that can be effective?
Yeah, I really want to stick with the black Tories thing, and I will attempt to create a bridge into the question that you're asking me now, right? So, in terms of love, Bell Hooks talks about a radical love ethic, and one that is truth-telling, one that is transparency, but also one that is also accountable, and that holding each other accountable for what we say and what we do, and the impact that can have is a form of is accountability, and therefore is also a form of love. May not feel like love, or may not look like the version of love we are conditioned to see and understand, but holding those who have, especially Black Tories in the top Conservative Party, therefore who has
Mm-hmm.
access to political power, holding them accountable and opening up and critiquing the rhetoric of what they say and who it ultimately will always harm is
Mm-hmm.
love. That is love. That is me saying, or other people saying, that what you are doing is damaging and you need to stop, right? Whether they stop or not
Mm-hmm.
is different, but being able to highlight that is a form of love.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I say that, because we think about accountability often in a very punitive sense. So,
Yeah.
prisons, like that. And of course, accountability doesn't have to exist in that way. Accountability can also be about political education. So, how do
Mm-hmm.
we understand how someone like Kemi even came into the politics of like tourism? And that's because she one part adopted the kind of model minority myth, right? If you work really hard,
Yeah.
we'll get through. And where does that lie itself in? That it's a form of, neoliberal conservatism that some Black folks produce because they see that as a way to save themselves in the context of white supremacy and imperialism.
Mm-hmm.
And so really the reality is like, how do we produce kind of critical consciousness that is also a form of love for Black people to not be seduced by these really harmful ideologies for themselves, right?
Mm.
Because
Mm.
whilst Kemi is in the Tories and she has, political power for now, we also have to think about like this is also harming her, whether she sees it or not. Like what she espouses actually affects her too. She may not see
Yep.
it that way, but it does. She's not disaggregated from her own like violence. And the harm is like maybe not materially, but the harm is like, ethically, morally, like she's creating a disconnect between her sense of Blackness to the people who look like her. And she's being
Mm.
weaponized by white supremacy to do that work. That is harmful. That's abuse on her.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Not you making me have sympathy for Kevin Badenoch. Wow. And
I
this
think
one to the day.
again, we can hold these tensions, we can hold sympathy, and we can hold accountability, and we can hold critique. We're human. We've been given with so many different types of sensibilities. We've been gifted with sensibilities, and therefore we have a range of sensibilities that we can enact, at the same time. So we can say like, this is harmful rhetoric to her. This is white
Mm-hmm.
supremacy to her. We can also acknowledge that what she's doing is also abusing other Black people and other brown people. That we can hold
Okay.
those two like contradiction tensions at the same time, which they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, then please carry on and segue into the question. Then, what does a
Right.
loving Black politic look like in the
Just
UK?
one example is just accountability and critical
Yeah.
consciousness. I think the idea of like, what does it mean to a loving Black politic is, I think we need to start understanding and produce. I do believe in producing critical consciousness and critical education and
Mm-hmm.
going back to like on the ground organizing. I think that is really necessary and important. Not to self promote, but hey, I will.
No, plug yourself, man. Come on.
So I organised with the Free Black Uni, which was started by Mel Wusu last year, spring 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the work that we are doing, that we're really working very hard, like all the different Black folks involved, is political education, is like, how do we make political education accessible to Black folks in the different contexts and realities that they exist in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, Free Black Uni isn't the only project. There's many other like on the ground projects that are doing that kind of work. Like oh gosh, I keep forgetting them. There's a group of like young Black, I think predominantly young Black men who have like,
Okay.
oh, what are they called? Let me not get the wrong name in it.
Okay.
So they called a tribe called something, and I remember it because it reminds me of a Tribe Called Quest, but it's not called
Okay.
that. It's something else. I can't remember their name, the full name. I'm really sorry. Sorry to that group, but I know you're doing really great.
It's all good.
So it's also like how to mobilize as well, I think is really important as part of love. Love is a really interesting thing to think about because we're often socialized to think about love as just romantic,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't think about like a radical ethic or a radical love. And I think it will be important for us to understand, like, even to explore like, what is radical love? Like, what does it mean to like care for someone? What does it mean to hold community for people? What does it mean to hold community for folks who have been downtrodden for a very long time?
Mm.
Folks who, in the context of the UK, where there was quite a robust political, anti-racist machinery at play that was held at the
Yeah.
helm by many Black activists for decades, and now it's been decimated to the hilt. And we're seeing, with Black Lives Matter and Free Black Uni and other kind of organizing groups come, pick up that mantle again and reform that work. And it's very young, it's very fresh, it's, probably just under 10 years in its making. Like, how do we extend love and trust to Black folks who see, especially Black Lives Matter, with huge
Yeah.
disdain and distrust? And what is
Mm.
the real root of that distrust? It's white supremacy.
But the real,
The
so
realty.
carry on.
No,
The
no,
reality is, it's been 21 minutes and you haven't mentioned Marxism yet.
no.
That's the real
Okay,
tea.
that's the realty. What do you
No,
say?
because I would have thought, when you're talking about arranging the politics, do you not feel like that somehow that we have to involve Marx in our critique? Is a Marxist analysis and a Marxist kind of leaning a politic that Black people need?
For sure, but you asked me about love.
That's
So-
fair enough.
so I was
Okay,
talking about-
no, that was amazing, by the way. But I feel like I want to segue that into
Okay.
a more general kind of
That.
politics.
Don't be like, you
And-
didn't say this. Don't try and make me your downfall. You didn't ask me that question.
Okay, let's segue into that now.
Okay.
Let's theorize and segue into that. The topic of what politics should Black people be adopting. And this is like disclaimer. I'm not, maybe Janine might, but I'm not telling people what they should and shouldn't follow.
I am.
I'm not telling people. Okay, cool. That's you.
I
I'm not telling
definitely
people.
am.
Okay, cool. Well then, what should people following according to Janine Francois? What should they be following, and why should they be following it, and why is that style of politic and that critique and that analysis the most helpful for Black people?
Yeah, so I think for disclosure and transparency, I have more recently come into like Marxist thoughts. I wouldn't say I'm the most sophisticated on the
Mhm.
topic, although I've read like a good number of like Black Marxist texts, especially between like stuff written between like 1930 and 1960, 1970s. So like much more kind of like more canonical kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
I would describe my politics as being a Black feminist, being a Black Marxist feminist.
Okay.
And the reason why I hold those two positions, I don't see them as competing or contradictory
Okay.
positions, is to really understand the kind of material reality in which Black people of all genders find themselves in, and how that intersects with patriarchy and capitalism and imperialism.
Okay.
And that these are all, systems of domination that are best buds with each other. They inform each other, and it creates experiences, especially around our lack of relationship to capital or a lack of relationship to wealth, or even the kind of working conditions on which we're disproportionately more likely to find ourselves in, right? So, for example, I work in a university. I used to work in a physical building pre-pandemic. And
Yeah.
who were the people that were more likely to be working on, as outsourced workers on a casual labour contract? It's Black women and it's brown women. It's brown migrant women and it's Black working class women, right? And so these are really precarious jobs. My university could decide to end a contract with that service provider, one, and two, we know that they don't have proper access to full employment rights, such as, being able to organise with a union, having proper sick pay, holiday pay, all the other important trappings that when one is considered an employee gets, i.e. someone like myself.
Yeah.
And I'm going to come into my own contract as well to understand, like, whilst I have a different material reality, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that different. And so when I think about like Black women and brown women or migrant women who are disproportionately going to be employed in these jobs on these contracts, then Marxism and a Black feminist Marxist framework is so important to offer liberation, which is you're not on these contracts, you are paid properly, you're not in awful working conditions, you have access to your full employment rights, you are able to organise, and you won't be penalised for, joining a trade union, right? So having like a Black Marxist feminist framework understands the ways in which Black women or women of colour are disproportionately in the most vulnerable economic positions. And then I'll segue to myself. So yes, I'm on a permanent contract, yay, go me, but I'm on a part-time, I work 0.5 hours, right?
What?
That's the reality of academia. Half of us ain't even on full-time contracts, right?
How
And
does that work?
right, because it's about exploitation. It's about giving me the least money for me to do the most work.
Oh,
And when we look at the data of who is going to be on a contract like mine, even if it's permanent, again, it's going to be disproportionately women and people of color. And then I would say women of color sit at that complete intersection of those disproportionately on a 0.5 or part-time contract and being paid at the bottom of the pay scale. So whilst I have a better material reality individually, if we understand myself, my subject position materially, and these like other women who I come into contact with, it's not that different. We're both in fucking precarious states, right? Sorry, I swear. Am I allowed to swear?
No, it's fine. Yeah,
Okay,
it's fine.
cool.
Don't worry. You're allowed to.
We're both in states of precarity. It manifests or plays out differently because of what our contracts are, but on a wider conceptual level, we're both in equally precarious states because we are both women of color, both women and the person of color, and both of those things.
So what essentially you're saying that the Marxist critique allowed you to understand that better?
Yeah. The Marxist critique allowed me not that I ever saw myself in competition or disaggregated. Like I hope, I can't remember what my thoughts were, but I like to believe I didn't. But like having a Marxist critique enabled to see why my reality isn't so different to her reality, and that we should be in solidarity with one another. That my fight is her fight. Me getting in better employment rights, or me in solidarity with a woman of color in an outsourced job and ensuring that they get full employment rights enables me to get employment rights. Like these aren't disaggregated struggles.
So then for you, for let's say the UK context, I know you said you will tell people what to do. Are you saying that people should become Marxists?
I'm saying
leaning
a union.
Okay.
People should join the union because that's the place in your organisation that gives you constituted legal rights. One, and two, I am saying that people should adopt Marxist politic. Yeah.
Why? I know you said you just told me why, but sell it more. Sell it to us.
I mean, people need to understand that you do not like first and foremost, you do not have capital. If you think you have capital, no, okay. Your iPhone is not capital, okay. Those new Air Forces are not capital, my friend. They're nice things. That's it. You have access to nice things.
Okay.
So firstly, to be a capitalist, you need to have actual capital, and that means owning the means of production. That means you own a labor force, a factory, you own production lines, you are making serious and real money. If you are some boy from the end who got themselves a nice investment job somewhere in the city and you're pulling in 100,000 grand, how much do you think that shareholder is really making? If you're making 100k, my friend, what is that shareholder pulling in? Probably 10 times what you're making.
I lie.
Okay.
And the funny thing is, people don't. Sorry to interject. I will let you carry on. But I think people fail to realize that if you're making 100 bags a year, you're much more close to the guy making 20 or 30 bags.
Exactly.
Than you are to the CEO of the company. Oh, people don't see that.
No, but this is where capitalism's seduced. So capitalism seduced that I'm making 100 bags a year. I'm on a really nice, sexy salary. Got a nice, car. Blah blah blah. Again, the trappings of nice things. These are not capital. These are not actual, real assets that enables you to kind of, engineer a kind of social like production line. And you just have access to nice things, perhaps more so than some. But as you say, like you are much closer to poverty and precarity than you are to the person who's got their yacht in the Caribbean.
Exactly.
But capitalism seduces us to make people believe that they too, even though it would be near impossible, can have that private yacht in
Exactly. So then, by you saying the Marxism critique just allows you to obviously understand that, but also allows us to have solidarity, or allows us to organize. Like, what does the Marxist critique do for us tangibly?
I think for me, a Marxist critique enables there's lots of different things. It enables us to understand where we really exist in these lines of power, economically speaking and materially speaking. And as you rightly say, someone pulling 100 bags is much more closer proximity to someone earning 20 bags. They may not see it that way, but that's the truth. And therefore, it will make sense, or be for one's benefit or a collective benefit to align yourself with those who are in more of an oppressed class than one might perceive himself to be. Also, the same young black, I mean, very specifically young black men, because, why not?
Yeah.
Y'all like 3 paychecks from getting unemployed and being on the streets, okay?
To be honest.
right? Like, if you really deep
You're 3 paychecks away
free
from joining
paychecks.
OnlyFans.
It's about losing that job, losing that nice house, losing that car, and where would you end up? Right?
OnlyFans.
There you go. There you go.
Exactly.
Right? So when you really, really deep it, like, yeah, you might, and do you know how that's true? Do you know how many like people who are quote unquote rich end up poor?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep. Yep.
And I say, materially wealthy or whatever, end up poor, because when you really look at it, they didn't have the full trappings to live this quote unquote capitalist lifestyle, or like the
Yep.
full access to capital to protect them from ever, being, entering positions of poverty. Jeff Bezos was never going to be poor, ever,
Exactly.
ever,
Exactly.
because he's a billionaire,
Exactly.
because he owns the means of production. He ain't never gonna
Exactly.
Whereas you, my friend, with your 100G working in Citibank, that you could end up poor in 6 months,
Mm-hmm. It's
or
true.
you could end destitute in 6 months. Jeff
It's
Bezos
true.
ain't gonna be like, oh, that's my friend who. You're an
That's
expendable.
true.
Like this is equally like, I'm talking about city bankers and young black men, because I feel like folks see that as some kind of like aspiration to get into, and it's like,
Yep.
no, like that's equally an expendable workforce, right? There's a whole surplus army. There's how many other young black men want to be a city banker?
It's true.
Loads. Like,
It's true.
so, and let me not.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
You
It's
want to
fine.
call
So
me
essentially, you're
Alessandra
saying
and how I'm anti-black men.
no, yeah, no, I know you're not. And you don't hate you don't hate black men, and I don't get involved in women's business.
Okay. one of those are facts and one of those are lies. But let's continue.
but we move. But okay, you listed out the things that it helps you know your position in that means of in that kind of production line. What else does it offer you?
Recently I've been reading a lot about like the post-colonial movements in the continent of Africa and in the Caribbean, and how like a Marxist framework was literally central to that narrative of a post-colonial framework, or a decolonial framework even, of liberation.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that many, West African nations, once, they quote unquote decolonize, so whether that's by force or fight, and equally in the Caribbean, many initially adopt anyway a Marxist politics, right? A Marxist way of organizing their society. And we have to think about why of all the types of politics that these radical leaders could be drawn to or exposed to, why did they lend themselves to that? And clearly there's something there about providing equity materially due to the impacts of colonization for for people. So just on that level of like, we have to historically think about why do revolutionary leaders, even if we think about the context in a Western sense, like the Black Panthers, they too drew reference into a Marxist politics. So this is an international thing of like different types of Black and liberatory struggles are drawn to this way of thinking, or drawn to this particular kind of politic, and we have to ask the question why. Like, why are they seduced by that? Why are they not seduced by capitalist thinking, right? And there's clearly something about, in order to have true liberation and to really dismantle the systems of power, we also have to think about ways in which production exists, and the ways in which economies exist, the ways in which Black bodies in a capitalist system anyway are always going to be the first killed, literally, the first harmed and abused. And why would we have a system, why would we uphold or adopt a system that was literally designed to annihilate us? Like capitalism, if we think about modern capitalism anyway, takes root from chattel slavery and the transatlantic slave trade, where people who, like you and I, were not even considered human. We were considered property, we were considered bonds, we were considered things to make money from. And why would I want to embrace that when it means embracing my dehumanization?
And that was a mic drop from Janine Francois, guys. I will post Janine's socials in the description of this episode. As always, you are listening to the Malcolm Effect with Mamadou. Please like, comment, subscribe. Be that on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or on YouTube. Until next time, guys. Peace out.